Yesterday, we lost a person whose life was a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the embodiment of justice. I don't have the words to capture what Nelson Mandela meant to all of humankind, so I'd just like to let his words suffice. On the 18th of May in 2002, in a tribute speech during the 90th birthday celebration of his compatriot Walter Sisulu, Nelson Mandela said this: "Often in addressing young people, I make the point that what counts in life is not the mere fact that we have lived. It is what difference we have made to the lives of others that will determine the significance of the life we lead." I'm going to ask now for two things. I'm going to ask everyone to please rise for a moment of silence, and then I'm going to ask for a round of applause for the life of Nelson Mandela. Please be seated. I can't imagine that there's anything better we could do than what we're doing here today that would better celebrate the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela. I'm Norman Reamer. I'm the Executive Director of NACDL and the Foundation for Criminal Justice on behalf of Nicole Austin-Hillary from the Brennan Center for Justice, who will speak in just a few moments, and all of the authors and essayists and panelists and the co-sponsors of this project, the Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, who are represented here by their leader this morning, Dave Laban, up in the back, the Center for New Leadership, who are represented here as well by their leader, the Center for New Leadership on Urban Solutions, the New York County Lawyers Association, and NYU Washington, D.C. I want to welcome all of you. Today in my remarks, I intend to explore one of the most important questions that we have not addressed during these many months that we've been working on this project. This question and its answer is the ultimate key to eliminating disparity in the criminal justice system. But first, some context. 14 months ago, on October 17th, 2012, I was privileged to deliver some opening remarks for this project. We began our search for a 21st century criminal justice system that would transcend racial and ethnic disparity with an extraordinary three-day conference and an ambitious plan for numerous follow-up projects, including the conference report, the publication of a series of essays, academic papers for legal periodicals, and a follow-up convening to assess various proposals. Today we near the completion of our multifaceted agenda for this project, but the end of this project is not the end of our commitment or our work. We still have a long way to go to achieve our goals. When we began, I noted that the criminal justice system is a window into society's soul. And I described in fairly graphic detail what we see when we look through that window in America. 2.2 million people incarcerated, mostly for nonviolent offenses, disproportionately minority populations by obscene margins, pervasive disparity at every phase of the process. I described the evidence of disparity that I personally saw virtually every day of the 29 years that I practiced criminal defense. The longer road, the steeper climb, and the harsher outcomes suffered by ethnic and racial minorities. But I also spoke optimistically about how diverse sponsors had come together in agreement that disparity exists and with a determined willingness to candidly explore creative change. And I know today, as I did last October, that if you are here, if you are participating in this conversation or viewing it somewhere around the country, then you are already part of the solution because it shows that you care. And the solution is already unfolding. What we have begun is starting to have an impact. All of the participating organizations in their own way have been spreading the word, circulating the report, generating interest and concern. Now, just from NACDL's standpoint alone, after the conference report was released, we conducted 3 podcasts on our criminal docket series. And as of this past Tuesday, there had been over 1,000 downloads of that podcast series. There have been numerous media accounts of the project and a report that has been posted, and the report itself has been posted on more than a dozen websites. And from NACDL's website alone, I can tell you that the report has been downloaded as of this past Tuesday 1,634 times. That's a lot of people reading what we have been talking about and talking about the solutions that we have been encouraging. And maybe best of all was, in terms of impact, this past Thanksgiving Eve, I received an email from a bar association in Washington State asking to use the jury selection section of our conference report as a teaching tool in a training program. So even before today's program and the publication of the articles we're going to discuss here, we're having an impact. People are thinking about and talking about the issues we've raised. And that's exactly the kind of ripple effect we want to have. But through it all, we have not yet addressed the one key question that flows from this obvious reality. The flip side of disparity is favoritism. To the extent that the criminal justice system treats minorities worse than white people, it can be said to favor white people. So here's the question. Why should a white person care about the disparate effect of our criminal justice system on racial and ethnic minorities? As a white man in a society that was shaped by white men, why should I care about this issue? Why should I care if kids in certain neighborhoods are routinely stopped and frisked by police because of who they are, if I don't have to worry about the same indignity being inflicted on my kid? Why should I care if a member of my family gets arrested and has a better chance of getting an opportunity for diversion, or a reduced sentence, or a lower bail, or a reduced charge? Why should I care, as I read just a few days ago, if 3 black varsity basketball players, while waiting for a bus, are arrested simply because they are black kids waiting for a bus? Why should I care if a slight hairline crack in a windshield or a non-functioning taillight is an excuse to stop a car, yank the people out of that car, throw them up against the hood or face down on the pavement in Harlem or the South Bronx or Bedford-Stuyvesant, if it doesn't happen in Scarsdale or Greenwich or Potomac? You see, the key challenge, when all is said and done, is to get those who either benefit from disparity or at least do not feel its sting to care and want change. Now, I know some will say that by the year 2040 or 2050, minority populations will be in the majority. But it is a false solution to wait for that day. First of all those who are disadvantaged should not have to wait another generation to end disparity. Second, it's an illusory solution, because there is no reason to expect that all racial or ethnic minorities will be of one mind, and it will be far longer time before the white population is not the most numerous and financially, politically powerful group, even if it is an overall minority. Finally, it fails to recognize that the problem of disparate treatment will not inevitably disappear. All over the world, we see second and third class citizenship inflicted on groups based on religion, family lines, and every other discernible difference among the peoples of the planet. The fact is that if you can imagine a world 500 years from now, when all races and ethnic groups have been commingled into what appears to be one universal earthling, there will always be differences among people. Disparity in a criminal justice system must be eliminated, not just for us and our neighbors, but for all people and for all time. To do that, we have to get people, like those of you who are here, to care about disparity and want to end it. If I have no reason to care, then as my friend and colleague Rick Jones somewhat provocatively, but not inappropriately suggested at the very first panel last year, then the answer to disparity really is quite simple. Arrest more white people. Treat white people as wretchedly as you treat everyone else, and there will no longer be disparity. And that may be true, but surely the answer to injustice cannot be more injustice. A more hopeful approach is to end the tolerance for disparity. To do that, we have to understand why some care and many do not. In my quest to answer that question, I could only look within myself. I tried to delve deep into my own roots to determine what made me care. Because if I could understand that, then maybe I can understand what will unlock the doors to make everyone else care. Now, criminal defense lawyers see disparity in a way that few others do who are not themselves victim of disparity. And so it's somewhat understandable why defense lawyers care about this problem. But disparity that I witnessed at every stage while I practiced was not when I started caring. It started long before that. In fact, it was the reason why I became a criminal defense lawyer. So I've given this a lot of thought since last fall. In my thinking, I recalled precise moments, experiences that made me care about this issue. 3 of them stood out. 3 that aroused my sense of injustice, a searing outrage that made me see things from a very different perspective. In grade school, I had a teacher who taught a wonderful unit on the peoples of the world and how America was a magnificent melting pot. The message was to celebrate all the different races and cultures. These units of studies would go on for several weeks. One morning, several of my classmates were gathered around a globe, all giggling. You know how many of those classrooms in fairly well-financed schools at that time had these standing globes in every one of them? When I stepped away, I walked over to the globe to see what was so funny. And across the continent of Africa, one of them had written, N-word land. After class, I complained to the teacher, demanding action. After all, the whole point of what she was teaching was to celebrate and rejoice in the diversity of all cultures. And she refused. She couldn't do anything about it, she said, because that's just the way some people think, and you just have to accept it. The second and third experiences were in high school. I didn't participate in team sports, but you know how important high school football can be. And I recall being in the locker room before the team played a school from a mixed-race community and seeing all the vulgarities that you can ever imagine intended to motivate the team. All of that with the tacit acknowledgement of the coaches and the school officials. The third experience was one that hit home the hardest, and it didn't involve race, and probably that's why it hit me the hardest. That was the Vietnam War era, and many, myself included, opposed the war. This school of white people self-divided. Those who felt the support of the war was a patriotic duty, and those who felt it was their duty to oppose the war. Those who were opposed to the war were derisively labeled intellectuals, and many who chose to wear long hair were singled out for a special kind of abuse. I didn't make the choice to wear my hair long, but I could have. Police would stop those long-haired people, those long-haired intellectuals in this community for no legitimate reason, just to hassle them. I had one friend who was repeatedly stopped, and on one occasion the police officer made him undo his belt and then inserted his hands under his pants and tightly squeezed his private parts, inflicting wanton pain and degradation, and told him that if he didn't want that to happen again, he should cut his hair and support the war. And the only reason it was him and not me was the length of his hair. These experiences may have been the intentional acts and official indifference of a bygone era, but the shame of disparity is not excused or diminished by the lack of overt motivation. It really comes down to this: a sense of outrage, a palpable sense that something is wrong. The sense of injustice must be awakened. The legal philosopher Edmund Kahn, who I actually quite enjoyed studying when I was at NYU in law school, said this: justice is the active process of remedying or preventing that which would arouse the sense of injustice. The sense of injustice revolts against whatever is unequal by caprice. We will eliminate disparity when we can arouse that sense of injustice. And the only way to make people care is to expose them to it. Make everyone see it, feel it, sense it. All the great work that so many groups are doing to expose the problem is having an impact. The Stop and Frisk lawsuit has opened a lot of eyes. All those downloads of the reports and the podcasts matter. The story about 3 kids getting arrested for no reason except for their race is now getting told instead of ignored. For too long, the criminal justice system has given a pass to society. Underlying biases could be masked by the otherness of labeling someone a criminal. Those days are coming to an end, and we're hastening that day. I am proud to be associated with this program. I am proud to be connected in some small way to all of you and all of our co-sponsors. I'm proud to be associated with all of my colleagues at NACDL, especially Angela and Fraser, who by sheer force of will, working with our friends at Brennan, has shepherded this project from the very beginning. And I am enormously proud to be associated with our next speaker, the director of the Brennan Center here in DC, Nicole Austin Hillary, whose passion for justice is a daily inspiration for all of us and especially for me. Nicole.
Good morning, all. I have little to add to what Norm said, and when he and I talked about doing the welcoming remarks, I said, Norm, you start. I said, because I know you are going to set the tone and get us all in the right frame of mind for the kind of discussion we need to have today. So I'm just going to do a few housekeeping things, and then I just want to leave you with a few thoughts to guide us throughout the day. Number one, I join Norm in thanking all of our co-sponsoring organizations and our friends who are here with us today. Divine, Dave, we are so happy that all of our organizations could continue this work and this effort, bringing us all here today to continue this important discussion. I would like to thank NYU's DC campus. This is a beautiful spot for those of you who have not been here before. And I know I sound a little biased because we're the Brennan Center at NYU, but this is a wonderful space, and we are greatly appreciative that they've opened the doors to allow us to have this event here today. And I want to underscore something that Norm said, which is without Angela and Fraser, Norm's colleague, and who's also a personal friend of mine, this would not have been possible today. She really just took the bull by the horns and shepherded us through this entire process. And I especially also want to thank my colleague, Kimberly Lebrano, who is a communications specialist with the Brennan Center, who worked hand in hand with Angeline, who is not here today because she's also in college and she's finishing an exam today. So despite all of her hard work, she could not be here, but I ask you all to thank her in her absence. And I'd also like to thank all of my other Brennan Center staff members. Our DC office, unlike New York, doesn't have 70 people in it. We're small but mighty, as I like to say, but everyone really rolled up their sleeves and made this all possible today. So thank you all. I want to say that for the remainder of today, I want everybody to think of this space, and I'm talking about not just this room that we're in, but the breakout rooms where we'll be, the hallway where we'll have lunch. I want you to think of this as the space where we have a cone of truth-telling. For those of you who are old enough to remember Max Smart and that old series Get Smart, they used to have the cone of silence that came down, and it allowed them to talk about things that no one else could hear. So I want you to envision that we have an imaginary cone that's coming down, but that is encouraging us, not only encouraging us, but requiring us to speak truth to power in this room. Particularly on the day after, the morning after the death of Mr. Mandela, if we learn nothing else from that man, it is that there is power in truth-telling, and our jobs are to speak what no one else is speaking, say the things that no one else is saying in an effort to ensure that these important issues are brought to the forefront and that we make even the weakest among us, the people in our society who are most frightened of these issues, that we bring them to a point where they can talk about these issues and head them face on. I also want to ask you all to think about throughout the day what it is that brought you to this room. And I don't mean your fancy title, because lots of you got fancy titles and work at fancy places. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what is it at your core that has made you the kind of person who cares about these issues. And that's something that Norm touched on. He shared with us very poignantly the things that made him care about these issues. I was telling my husband last night after hearing about Mr. Mandela's death that it felt so personal to me because I remember when I was in college learning about Mr. Mandela, learning about the anti-apartheid movement is what helped to bring me to a level of race consciousness that I had never known before. And I grew up in a predominantly black city, black and brown city. I went to a predominantly black high school, but I'm telling you, until I learned about his work and his struggle, it was never, ever, I was never as enlightened as I became once I learned about those things. And that was the point for me where I changed, where I became a race person. And I tell people to this day, I am a civil rights lawyer because I care about race, and that is what's important to me. So think about what it is in your gut that brings you to this space and makes you say, this is important and I have to make a change. Secondly, I also want to encourage you all to think about what it is that is really the problem at the core of these disparity issues that we face. Yesterday, I did a radio show on talking about mass incarceration and sentencing issues. And it was a call-in show, and one of the callers called in and posed a question to me and wanted to know if I thought the problem with racial disparities stemmed from the fact that there was malfeasance and ill will on the part of prosecutors and people who work in law enforcement, or if I thought they were simply just reacting to statistical data that tells them that black and brown people, are the people who commit the most crimes, and that's where the problems lie, and that they're simply doing their job based on that information. And what I said in response to that caller was, I said, I think it's more of the former. But I qualified it. I said, not that we're dealing with people who have ill will, but that we're dealing with people who are like ourselves, who have biases, who have implicit biases, and the only way that we're going to deal with these issues and figure out how we stop being biased is to take a good look at how we think, how we treat one another, and what is happening on a day-to-day basis in our society. So again, I encourage you all to speak truth to power, and don't be afraid to tell people what the real issues are. Don't be afraid to say, you know what? White people are not getting it. We need to talk to more white people. White people need to come to the table. Whatever the issue is, don't be afraid of it. So remember, there's a cone of truth-telling over us today. Think about what it is that brought you to this room and drives you and makes you care about these issues. And don't be afraid to push not only others, but push yourselves.